Pay close attention, because what unfolds today has the potential to change the way you experience your own emotions for the rest of this year. Something is shifting beneath the surface, and whether you realize it or not, you'll be moving toward this moment for much longer than you think. As the morning begins, the moon leaves Gemini and enters Cancer, and that simple movement across the sky activates something deeply personal inside you. It is as though a hidden chamber within your emotional world, one that has remained locked and untouched for far too long, suddenly begins to open. This is not one of those ordinary lunar transitions that passes by unnoticed. What is taking place now is the result of an energetic process that has been building day after day, layer after layer, quietly gathering momentum until it reaches a point where release becomes unavoidable. For certain people, the emotional impact of this shift will be so profound that it may feel as if life itself has intervened and broken through a wall they did not even realize they were still carrying. Not to wound them, but to free them. Not to create pain, but to create space. The kind of space that allows a person to finally exhale after holding tension for far too long. The kind of relief that arrives when something trapped inside finally finds its way out. What makes this period even more remarkable is that there are 3 zodiac signs standing directly in the path of this energy. They are not simply positioned for a fortunate day or a pleasant surprise. They are positioned for something far more meaningful. They are standing at the threshold of an emotional transformation capable of altering the way they see themselves, the people around them, and the future they have been trying to build. If you have found yourself awake late at night recently, staring into darkness while your thoughts race in endless circles, if you have felt exhausted despite your efforts to find peace, there is a reason for it. There is a larger pattern behind what you have been experiencing, and understanding that pattern changes everything. But before we get there, you need to understand why this week matters so much. Nothing about today's developments is accidental. Every piece of this cosmic puzzle has been assembling with extraordinary precision, and what emerges now may become one of the most important emotional turning points you encounter all year. The tension you have been carrying is real. It is not something you imagined. It is not weakness, and it is not simply the result of being busy. You have probably noticed it in subtle ways. Maybe your patience has felt thinner than usual. Maybe your mind keeps returning to the same questions without ever finding a satisfying answer. Maybe conversations linger in your memory long after they end. Maybe decisions you thought were settled suddenly feel uncertain again. There has been an underlying sense that something is unfinished, unresolved, waiting for clarity that never seems to arrive. During the past several days, the moon has been traveling through Gemini, and Gemini operates through the mind. It accelerates thought. It stimulates curiosity. It encourages analysis. Under this influence, the mental landscape becomes crowded. Every interaction feels worthy of review. Every choice invites reconsideration. Every possibility branches into 10 more possibilities. You may have spent hours replaying old conversations, examining tiny details, questioning your instincts, and revisiting situations that should have been left behind weeks ago. It is as though your awareness has been pulled into a whirlwind of constant mental activity. Imagine dozens of thoughts competing for attention all at once, each one demanding to be solved immediately. That has been the atmosphere surrounding many people during this phase. Yet the most frustrating part of the experience is that somewhere inside you, beneath all the noise, you already know the solution does not exist within endless analysis. You can sense it. You know that another round of thinking will not suddenly deliver peace. You know that no amount of mental effort can untangle what you are feeling. And still the cycle continues. The mind keeps searching even when the heart is asking for something entirely different. This is not a flaw. It is part of the process. The Gemini moon has been stretching your mental energy to its outer limits. It has been pushing you toward a point where thinking alone can no longer sustain you. In a strange way, the exhaustion itself serves a purpose. The cosmos has been guiding your attention through the maze of the mind until you finally recognize that the answer lives somewhere else. Because what arrives today is not a message designed for logic. It is not information meant to be decoded through analysis. It is something the heart understands instinctively. But before the heart can speak clearly, the mental noise must quiet down. That is why tonight's new moon carries such significance. On Sunday, June 14th, a super new moon forms at 24 degrees Gemini. This moment represents the climax of everything that has been building. It is the peak of the mental intensity that has surrounded recent days. A super new moon occurs when the moon is positioned closer to Earth than usual, increasing its energetic influence and magnifying its emotional impact. Because this new moon takes place in the later degrees of Gemini, the pressure does not simply continue. It reaches a threshold, a saturation point. Imagine spending days underwater, holding your breath longer than feels possible. At first, you manage. Then discomfort appears. Eventually, every instinct inside you demands release. Your lungs burn, your body tightens. The need for air becomes impossible to ignore. That image mirrors the emotional journey many people have been living through recently. And then something changes. The moment the moon enters Cancer, it feels as though you finally break through the surface. The first deep breath arrives. Relief rushes in. Tension begins to dissolve. Life returns to places that felt numb. For some people, this transition will feel startlingly powerful, almost like waking up after a long period of emotional hibernation. Yet beneath the obvious story of the new moon, another layer is operating quietly in the background. This is the detail many people overlook. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, the planet responsible for governing the energy of this entire lunation, is no longer in Gemini at all. Mercury has already entered Cancer, and that changes everything that follows. What most people fail to recognize is that the emotional confusion they have been wrestling with was never caused by a single influence. Two entirely different currents have been moving through your inner world at the same time, and that hidden conflict explains why recent days have felt so difficult to understand. On one level, Gemini energy has been dominating your conscious awareness, pulling your attention toward logic, analysis, questions, and endless attempts to figure everything out. Yet beneath that surface activity, something much deeper has already been changing. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini itself and the planet connected to thinking, perception, communication, and mental processing, has already moved into Cancer. That detail changes the entire story. It means that while your mind has been trying to solve everything intellectually, the force powering those thoughts has already been operating through emotion. In other words, your thinking has been swimming in emotional waters long before you consciously realized it. This creates a powerful internal divide. One side of you has been searching for answers through reason, evidence, and certainty. Another side has been quietly moving toward a truth that cannot be explained through logic alone. Perhaps that is why recent conversations have felt unusually complicated. Perhaps you have found yourself struggling to express something you could feel clearly inside, but could not translate into words. Maybe you knew exactly what your heart was trying to say, yet every attempt to communicate it somehow fell short. If that sounds familiar, understand that you were not imagining it. Your mind and your emotions have been speaking completely different languages. One has been demanding clarity and conclusions. The other has been longing for connection, vulnerability, and emotional authenticity. As those opposing needs pulled against each other, pressure naturally accumulated. And now that pressure has reached a point where it can no longer remain hidden. Think back over the past several days. Consider the themes that kept appearing. Perhaps family matters resurfaced unexpectedly. Perhaps old emotional wounds connected to belonging, security, or acceptance demanded attention. Perhaps certain relationships forced you to examine uncomfortable questions about where you stand and whether you truly feel seen by the people around you. Whatever form these experiences took, they were not random events. The cosmic atmosphere has been carefully revealing emotional material that was buried beneath the surface, because certain truths could not remain concealed any longer. Growth often begins with acknowledgement. Healing often begins when something long ignored finally receives attention. Sometimes the conversation you dread becomes the conversation that changes everything. Sometimes the emotion you keep pushing away becomes the very doorway that leads to freedom. The events unfolding recently have not been obstacles. They have been preparation. They have been clearing the ground for what comes next. And now we arrive at the moment where the energy finally begins to turn. Today, Monday, June 15th, the moon enters Cancer. At first glance, this may seem like a simple change in zodiac signs, but energetically, it carries far greater significance. Cancer is the moon's natural home. It is the place where lunar energy expresses itself without resistance, distortion, or limitation. Here, the emotional body speaks with complete honesty. Nothing stands between feeling and expression. There is no need to filter, rationalize, or explain away what is happening inside. The moon functions at full strength, and because of that, many people will notice the shift almost immediately. The difference may feel startling. For days, your awareness has been scattered across countless thoughts. Your attention has jumped from one concern to another. Anxiety may have appeared without any obvious cause. You may have sensed that an important realization was waiting somewhere beyond your reach, yet every attempt to grasp it only created more uncertainty. Then suddenly, something changes. The noise begins to fade. The constant mental movement starts slowing down. It is almost as if a machine that has been running continuously for days finally powers off. The silence that follows feels unfamiliar at first, but then something remarkable happens. You begin hearing yourself again. What emerges is not emptiness. It is not emotional distance. It is reconnection. A return to your own emotional center after spending too much time trapped inside mental chaos. Some people will experience this shift physically. Breathing becomes deeper. The shoulders relax. The nervous system settles. The body begins releasing tension it has been carrying without realizing it. Others may notice emotions surfacing unexpectedly. A memory suddenly appears. A feeling once buried returns. Tears arrive without warning. A forgotten part of yourself asks to be acknowledged. If this happens, resist the urge to judge it. Do not mistake emotional release for fragility. In reality, it is often a sign of strength. It means the walls built by overthinking are finally coming down. It means the heart is being allowed to participate again. What has been hidden beneath layers of analysis is finally receiving space to speak. Yes, that process can feel intense. Yes, it can feel overwhelming. But it is also where healing begins. Yet there is an even larger story unfolding behind today's shift, and this is where things become truly extraordinary. The moon is not entering empty territory. It is arriving in a space that has already been energetically prepared. The emotional landscape waiting in Cancer has been accumulating power for days, almost like water gathering behind a dam. Most people are unaware of this because they focus only on what is happening now, but the roots of today's activation stretch back much further. 6 days ago, on June 9th, one of the most important alignments of the entire year took place. Venus and Jupiter formed an exact conjunction at 25 degrees Cancer. Pause for a moment and consider the significance of that meeting. Venus governs love, relationships, affection, beauty, harmony, self-worth, and the ways we connect emotionally with ourselves and others. Jupiter governs growth, expansion, opportunity, blessings, abundance, generosity, and faith in what is possible. Astrologically, these are considered two of the most supportive influences available. When they unite, they create conditions that encourage emotional healing, renewed hope, deeper connection, and a greater capacity to receive goodness. What makes this alignment even more powerful is that it occurred within Cancer itself. Cancer governs emotional safety, family ties, nurturing, protection, belonging, and the private spaces of the heart that few people ever see. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, meaning its ability to expand positive outcomes functions with exceptional strength in this sign. Venus, moving alongside Jupiter, directs that supportive energy into the deepest emotional layers of human experience. Imagine planting a seed beneath rich soil. At first, there is no visible evidence that anything has changed. The surface appears exactly the same. Yet beneath the ground, an invisible process has already begun. Life starts organizing itself. Roots begin forming. Growth prepares itself in silence. That is exactly what the Venus and Jupiter conjunction initiated. It planted a seed of emotional renewal, a seed connected to self-worth, a seed connected to healing, a seed connected to love, connection, security, and emotional abundance. But every seed requires activation. Potential alone is never enough. And that activation arrives now. As the moon enters Cancer, it moves directly into the environment where Venus and Jupiter created this reservoir of possibility. Suddenly, what existed as potential begins transforming into lived experience. Feelings become easier to understand. Emotional insights arrive naturally. Relationships reveal new depth. Healing becomes something you can actually feel rather than merely imagine. The heart begins recognizing opportunities that the mind was too distracted to notice. This is why today matters. This is why the timing feels so precise. This is not simply another lunar movement across the zodiac. It is the awakening of a rare cycle that has been building toward this exact moment. A Venus and Jupiter conjunction that occurs only once every 12 years is now being activated by the arrival of the moon in the same emotional territory. Every piece is unfolding in sequence. Every layer is connecting exactly as intended. And for the three zodiac signs most directly aligned with this energy, the effects may become impossible to ignore. But even that is not the final chapter of today's story. There is another development waiting just ahead, one that explains the restlessness, the sleepless nights, and the endless thoughts that have been refusing to leave you alone. None of that happened without purpose. During the evening hours, Venus, now traveling through Leo, forms an exact sextile with Uranus in Gemini. Uranus is the planet of sudden awakening, unexpected breakthroughs, shocking realizations, and life-changing moments of clarity that appear without warning. It rarely whispers. It tends to arrive like lightning. The mental pressure you have been carrying was not meaningless. It was preparing the ground for something. It was stretching your awareness until you became ready to see what you could not see before. And as this Venus and Uranus connection comes alive, the reason behind all that preparation is about to reveal itself in a way that cannot be ignored, setting the stage for the next extraordinary piece of this unfolding story. What you may not realize is that your mind has not been restless without reason. Every sleepless night, every repetitive thought, every moment where your attention seemed unable to settle has been part of a larger preparation process unfolding beneath your awareness. For days, perhaps even weeks, your inner world has been operating like a system searching for a missing piece. Your thoughts have been moving faster than usual because something deep within you has been attempting to connect dots that were never meant to be solved through logic alone. The strange part is that the breakthrough you have been chasing is closer than you think. In fact, today may be the day it finally arrives. Not through another conversation, not through another round of analysis, not through endlessly revisiting the same questions. The answer comes differently, It appears in an instant, a realization, a knowing, a moment of certainty that enters your awareness so suddenly and so completely that it leaves no room for doubt. You may find yourself wondering why you spent so much energy searching when the truth feels so obvious once it reveals itself. But that was always part of the design. The Gemini influence had to push your mind to its limit. It had to stretch your analytical abilities until they could go no further. Only then could something deeper emerge. Only then could intuition move to the front of the stage without being interrupted by fear, overthinking, or mental resistance. When the insight finally arrives, it lands without argument. There is no internal debate. There is no second guessing. There is only recognition. For some people, this revelation centers around relationships. A person you have been questioning suddenly reveals their true place in your life. You understand who genuinely supports your growth and who merely occupies space within your emotional world. Others may experience the opening through financial matters. An opportunity appears unexpectedly. A solution arrives from a direction you never considered. A possibility that once seemed invisible suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. For some, an entirely new path reveals itself, a path that existed all along but remained hidden until this exact moment. The Cancer moon creates the emotional environment necessary to receive this gift. Venus, forming a sextile with Uranus, delivers the awakening itself. One provides emotional openness. The other delivers revelation. Together, they create the conditions for profound change. And among all 12 signs, there are 3 that stand directly beneath this energy. The first is Cancer. Cancer. If your sun, moon, or rising sign falls within your sign, what unfolds now reaches far beyond an ordinary astrological influence. This is not simply a transit passing through your chart. This is a deeply personal return to yourself. Somewhere along the way, you began placing everyone else's needs ahead of your own. You became the caretaker, the listener, the person who absorbed the emotional weight of others without asking for anything in return. You offered support. You carried burdens that were never fully yours. You showed up repeatedly, even when you were exhausted. And perhaps the hardest part is that many of the people you helped never stopped long enough to ask how you were holding up. The Gemini new moon activates your 12th house, the realm associated with hidden fears, emotional depletion, solitude, and the subconscious patterns that quietly drain your energy. For weeks, you may have been surrounded by demands, expectations, and emotional noise that did not belong to you. Yet you kept carrying it because part of you believed that was what loyalty required. Today changes that narrative. As the moon enters Cancer, it illuminates your 1st house, the area connected to identity, selfhood, personal power, and the relationship you have with yourself. The shift can feel almost immediate. What once seemed confusing becomes obvious. What once felt heavy begins to lift. You recognize something that has been true for a long time. You have been giving from an emotional reserve that was depleted long ago. The breakthrough waiting for you is not dependent on another person's behavior. It is not something arriving from the outside world. It emerges from within. It is the moment you realize that caring for yourself is not something that requires permission. It is the moment you stop feeling guilty for protecting your energy. It is the moment you understand that your emotional health deserves the same devotion you so freely give to everyone else. With both Jupiter and Mercury already moving through your sign, this awakening carries extraordinary force. It is not subtle. It arrives like a wave that cannot be ignored. And later in the evening, when Venus forms its sextile to Uranus and activates your 2nd house of self-worth, value, and security, another important realization arrives. It may involve finances. It may involve your relationship with abundance. It may involve the fear you have carried quietly for far too long. Whatever form it takes, something releases. Something that once felt heavy loses its power. Something that once controlled your decisions no longer holds the same influence. And as that burden falls away, you move forward carrying a level of confidence that feels different from anything you have experienced recently. Not loud confidence. Not performative confidence. A quiet certainty rooted in self-respect. A certainty nobody can take away from you. Then we come to Scorpio. Scorpio, the journey you have been walking has not been easy. In fact, recent weeks may have felt like an emotional battlefield hidden entirely within your own mind. The Gemini new moon activates your 8th house, one of the deepest and most intense regions of the chart. This is the domain of transformation, psychological complexity, unresolved wounds, trauma, emotional entanglements, and the aspects of ourselves we often prefer not to confront. Whether you wanted to or not, life has been guiding you into those spaces. Old fears may have resurfaced. Trust issues may have demanded attention. Power dynamics within relationships may have become impossible to ignore. You may have found yourself obsessing over situations you cannot control, replaying events repeatedly, searching for answers that refuse to appear. At times, it may have felt as though you were trapped inside a cycle with no visible exit. Yet even though the process has been exhausting, something important has been happening beneath the surface. You've been doing profound inner work, the kind of work few people are willing to face, the kind that requires courage because it demands honesty. And today, the energy finally begins to reward that effort. When the moon enters Cancer, it illuminates your 9th house, the house associated with wisdom, perspective, spiritual growth, higher understanding, and the ability to see beyond immediate circumstances. Suddenly, the lens changes. Instead of focusing exclusively on the wound, you begin seeing the larger story surrounding it. The betrayal that once felt senseless reveals a lesson. The loss that once felt unfair reveals a purpose. The struggle that once appeared random reveals a pattern. This is not shallow positivity. It is not pretending. Difficult experiences were easy. It is something much deeper. It is the moment where understanding finally reaches your emotional core. The realization does not remain intellectual. It enters your body. It enters your spirit. It creates a release so profound that you feel it physically. For the first time, you understand that your suffering was not meaningless. The Cancer moon forms a harmonious water trine to your Scorpio placements, and trines carry an energy of flow, ease, and natural support. For a sign accustomed to battling through emotional storms and earning every inch of progress through struggle, this experience may feel almost unreal. Instead of resistance, there is movement. Instead of conflict, there is understanding. Instead of carrying everything alone, there is a sense that life is finally working with you rather than against you, and that realization becomes the doorway through which the next chapter is about to begin. For Scorpio, the most surprising part of this entire experience is that the breakthrough does not arrive because you fought harder. It arrives because you finally stop fighting. That may sound contradictory to a sign that has spent so much of life surviving through strength, resilience, and determination, but this is exactly where the energy changes. The answers you have been pursuing are not hidden behind another strategy. They are not waiting at the end of another battle. They are not dependent on your ability to control every variable or anticipate every outcome. In fact, the more tightly you try to hold everything together, the more elusive clarity becomes. The path forward reveals itself only when you allow yourself to release what cannot be controlled. There is a profound difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up comes from defeat. Letting go comes from trust. And today, life is inviting you into that trust. As you soften your grip on the situations that have consumed so much of your emotional energy, a larger picture begins to emerge. What seemed complicated starts making sense. What seemed blocked begins moving again. What seemed impossible starts revealing unexpected openings. Yet what makes this period truly remarkable is that the reward does not remain internal. The healing does not stay confined to your thoughts, your emotions, or your spiritual understanding. It begins materializing in visible ways. The changes become real, tangible, measurable. Venus is currently moving through your 10th house, the area connected to public achievement, reputation, professional growth, recognition, and the legacy you are building in the world. Simultaneously, Venus forms a sextile with Uranus, positioned in your 8th house. This creates a powerful energetic bridge between transformation and manifestation. The emotional excavation you have been doing behind the scenes begins generating results that can be seen in your external reality. For some Scorpios, this arrives through career developments that seem to appear out of nowhere. A door opens. An opportunity surfaces. Recognition finally reaches something you have been working toward quietly. For others, support arrives through financial channels. Resources become available. Assistance appears unexpectedly. A solution presents itself from a source you never anticipated. The details may differ from person to person, but the message remains consistent. The universe is responding to the work you have done. Every difficult conversation with yourself, every fear you confronted, every uncomfortable truth you were brave enough to acknowledge. None of it was wasted. None of it was invisible. What arrives now feels less like luck and more like evidence. Evidence that your transformation mattered. Evidence that your growth created space for something better to enter. And perhaps most importantly, evidence that you are finally prepared to receive what once would have passed you by. Then we arrive at Pisces, and the story unfolding for you carries an entirely different emotional tone. Before we go any further, pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you felt genuinely happy? Not distracted from your problems, not temporarily entertained, not convincing yourself everything was fine because you did not want to burden anyone else. When was the last time your spirit felt light? Truly light. For many Pisces placements, that answer may not come easily. Recent months have carried a weight that has been difficult to ignore. Saturn's presence in your sign has demanded a level of maturity that can feel exhausting. Saturn is not interested in fantasy. It does not encourage avoidance. It does not allow you to drift comfortably through life untouched by responsibility. Instead, Saturn insists upon growth. It asks for discipline. It requires accountability. While those lessons ultimately strengthen you, they often arrive carrying a heaviness that can overshadow joy. The imaginative, dreamy, emotionally fluid nature that Pisces is known for may have felt constrained. Life may have become more serious than you wanted it to be. Obligations may have multiplied. Responsibilities may have consumed time and energy that once belonged to creativity, wonder, and emotional freedom. At the same time, the super new moon in Gemini has been activating your 4th house of home, roots, family, and emotional foundations. Rather than feeling like a safe harbor, this area of life may have demanded significant attention. Family dynamics may have become complicated. Domestic circumstances may have felt unstable. Questions about belonging, comfort, and security may have surfaced repeatedly. Even spaces that once felt familiar may have carried an undercurrent of tension, creating the uncomfortable feeling that true rest remained just out of reach. But today introduces a completely different atmosphere. When the moon enters Cancer, it activates your 5th house, one of the most vibrant and life-affirming areas of the Zodiac wheel. This is the realm of creativity, romance, self-expression, joy, passion, playfulness, and the part of your spirit that remembers how to experience wonder. It is the house that reconnects you to the simple beauty of being alive. After such a prolonged period of emotional heaviness, the contrast may feel extraordinary. Imagine living for months beneath an overcast sky. At first, you barely notice the absence of sunlight. Gradually, you adapt to the grayness. Eventually, it begins to feel normal. Then one day, the clouds part and color returns to the world. That is the sensation many Pisces placements may experience now. The shift does not necessarily arrive through dramatic events. In fact, its power often comes through seemingly ordinary moments. A conversation touches your heart unexpectedly. A song awakens emotions you thought had gone silent. A creative idea sparks excitement that has been missing for months. A gesture of kindness reminds you that beauty still exists. Whatever form it takes, it reconnects you with something precious. A feeling you feared had disappeared. A part of yourself you thought was gone. Simultaneously, the Venus and Uranus sextile activates your 6th house of daily routines and your 4th house of home and family. Because of this, small developments carry surprisingly large emotional consequences. A daily habit shifts and creates unexpected relief. A health concern begins improving. A family issue that has lingered for too long finally starts moving toward resolution. An environment that once felt stressful becomes noticeably calmer. Tiny adjustments create waves that spread through every area of life. For Pisces, the miracle unfolding now is not necessarily about acquiring something entirely new. It is about recovering something you temporarily lost along the way. It is the return of faith, the return of inspiration, the return of emotional openness, the return of your ability to dream without immediately questioning whether you deserve those dreams. For so long, life has revolved around lessons, obligations, and expectations. Today, the universe gently reminds you of something important. You are still allowed to experience joy. You are still allowed to create. You are still allowed to fall in love with life. You are still allowed to be inspired. Saturn's teachings remain valuable, but even the most demanding journey includes moments where the burden becomes lighter. This is one of those moments, and its impact may reach far deeper than you initially realize. Yet the story does not end with today. The energy activated on June 15th continues evolving in the days that follow. It expands, it deepens, it reveals new layers. On June 16th, Venus forms a trine with Neptune. The emotional openings created during the previous day become infused with compassion, empathy, understanding, and spiritual healing. Any cracks that appeared in emotional defenses now become channels through which healing can flow. Resentments that once felt permanent begin loosening their hold. Protective walls start softening. For some people, forgiveness becomes possible for the first time. For others, the person receiving that forgiveness is themselves. There is a dreamlike quality surrounding this transit. Hearts become gentler. Emotional receptivity increases. The need to defend old wounds begins fading. Something you believed would always hurt may suddenly feel ready to be released. Then another important chapter arrives. On June 21st, the Sun enters Cancer, marking the summer solstice and the longest day of the year. Symbolically, this transition carries tremendous significance. Everything the Moon revealed emotionally on June 15th begins rising into conscious awareness. What started as a feeling becomes understanding. What arrived as intuition becomes certainty. What emerged quietly from the depths of the heart steps fully into the light of consciousness. The emotional breakthrough becomes integrated into your identity. The wisdom becomes part of who you are. The lesson transforms from experience into guidance that you can carry forward. But none of that happens without this moment. Everything begins here. It begins when the Moon enters Cancer, and the constant mental noise finally loses its power. It begins when you stop demanding that every answer arrive through logic alone. It begins when you become willing to listen to what your emotions have been trying to communicate for far longer than you realize. The uncertainty mattered. The overthinking mattered. The sleepless nights mattered. Every challenge served a purpose. Every frustration prepared the ground. Every moment brought you closer to this turning point. And now, only one question remains. Are you willing to receive what has been trying to reach you all along? Are you willing to set down the armor you have been carrying? Are you willing to stop proving your strength long enough to experience something softer? Are you willing to trust that growth does not always arrive through struggle? Because the blessings approaching now do not force their way into your life. They wait patiently. They wait for openness. They wait for readiness. They wait for the moment you decide to say yes. And sometimes the most important shift of an entire year begins with something far simpler than people imagine. Sometimes it begins with a single choice. A choice to open your heart, trust what is unfolding, and step through a doorway that has been waiting for you all along.